fought with Milo Yiannopoulos. He fought with Candace Owens. He argued with Stefan Molyneux. He argued with a lot of these people, argued with Ben Shapiro. And so it felt like he's an honest actor trying to like navigate his way through. And then eventually, to your point, however he got to the place, he ended up in a very, very bad place.
Kyle Kulinski went on the Luke Thomas Gets Political show to talk about what happened to Joe Rogan. Kyle Kulinski was on Joe Rogan's show multiple times and was kind of a fan of Joe Rogan and maybe even sort of a friend of his, or at least friendly with him. But on this show, he outlines how Joe Rogan has moved to the right, become a MAGA commentator, essentially. Luke Thomas Gets Political channel seems to be pretty new. They've been around for about a month, and I was not familiar with his channel before, so I thought maybe some people on my channel had not seen this video, so I wanted to go over it and show what Kyle Kulinski had to say about Joe Rogan and share my thoughts as well. Let's get into it together.
You've gone pretty hard on Joe Rogan. As a disclosure, I was on one time. I think you've been on like 6 or 7 a million times. He was very friendly to me, but obviously I was on to talk MMA. I wasn't on to talk anything else. We talked a little bit of extra stuff, but we talked a little bit of Monopoly, but mostly MMA. And I was not back on after talking about the UFC's Monopoly, which is, I don't think, a coincidence. But
that's right. Yeah, Dana White. He's close with Dana.
Yeah, but I guess my question is, I certainly understand your objections, but make the case for me about going hard at him.
I mean, I think the impact that he has on the body politic is horrendous, right? Here's this guy who I sat across from, like you said, 5, 6 times, however many times it was. And I would make left-wing arguments. He would nod in agreement to those arguments. I would leave thinking, Joe's a good guy. Joe kind of understands, where I'm at politically, and he's somewhat similar. He supported Bernie Sanders at one point. And so it felt like his contribution to the body politic was a net positive. But then over time, he really embedded himself within a very deep right-wing bubble surrounded by conservative MMA people and conservative comedians. And then eventually that parlayed into conservative billionaires and conservative politicians. And so at some point, he became the guy who appears like, hey, I'm the everyman, I'm the likable guy. But also, now I'm going to humanize Peter Thiel. Now I'm going to humanize J.D. Vance. Now I'm going to humanize Elon Musk. Now I'm going to humanize Donald Trump and sit here while he lies to my face for 3 hours straight and never push back on anything. And so at some point, what I was struggling with is like, if this was anybody other than Joe Rogan, I would have been ripping them on my show already for quite a while. So am I going to let my personal feelings towards the man, because I do like him very much interpersonally, am I going to let my personal feelings for the man cloud my judgment in the sense that I'm not going to be objective about the impact I think he's having on the body politic? And so at some point it was like, look, if I'm being honest, there is a wealth of material that he gives us all the time, because there's so many moments that are just like, you don't know what the hell you're talking about, or you get something dead wrong, or you allow a billionaire to lie about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and don't correct them and believe all their bullshit when they pretend like that agency debanks people when it does the opposite and protects people from debanking. So at some point it just became untenable. And so now in this moment, you can kind of see it in real time that Joe and a lot of his other comedian friends, they're vibe masters, right? They sense the vibes in the country and they feel like, okay, Trump's really not that cool anymore. And so you see him slowly trying to tiptoe out of the room. Joe did that with, I think it was the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case, where he was like, I don't think it's a good idea to just like get rid of due process, bro. I mean, I think that's probably not great. But like, it'll be that, like a little thing, mild comment against Trump and saying Trump's name. And then in the next episode, it's right back to sucking him off the entire time. And so I even view the current role he plays as very dangerous and very horrible for the body politic. And so he's a target-rich environment right now. And I wouldn't change anything about how I approach that situation, because I do feel like that I was really kind to him for really long. And if anything, people could critique me in the sense that they say, you took too long before you really opened up to go after him. I mean, I would disagree with that. I really think I went on the timeline that I thought was best. Yeah, I went on the timeline that I thought was best in the sense that it really had to get to the point where I was like, okay, bro, like really? So it took me a while, but when I finally got there, yeah, I mean, it just, I have to treat him like the powerful media figure he is. I mean, he was the #1 podcast in the country for a very long time. He's been dethroned by the Midas Touch guys, who are an anti-Trump podcast, by the way. But yeah, I don't think I changed anything about how I approached it.
I don't know any of these people personally. Kyle Kulinski, obviously. I mean, I don't know Joe Rogan. And you never know with any of these people, what's an act and all of that. It could just be, it's all professional wrestling behind the scenes. And, they have these disagreements and criticize each other and it's all fake. But Kyle Kulinski seems pretty genuine to me. And one of the things that I think is different about somebody like Kyle Kulinski versus so many of the MAGA right-wing people is that he'll admit that he was wrong. He's admitting, I've seen him make similar comments to this over and over on other shows, The Majority Report, and he talked with Francesca Fiorentini, and he said, hey, I was wrong. Whereas all the MAGA types, it's always, a logic pretzel to defend their position now that's completely different than the position that they had yesterday. In terms of Joe Rogan himself, people have long said that he's somebody who he's just going to agree with whoever's in the room. If it's Trump in the room with him, he's going to agree. If it's Bernie in the room with him, he's going to agree. And there's certainly some of that to a degree, but it definitely seems that there's been a change in Joe Rogan. I was never an avid listener or watcher of Joe Rogan's show. I liked when he would talk to celebrities. I never was interested in his political views. And I would just watch sometimes, clips if it was a celebrity that I liked or found interesting. But so much of this, you just wonder what happens to somebody when they amass hundreds of millions of dollars. He got what? $200 million from Spotify for his show. I don't know what he's supposed to be worth, but he's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And like Kyle Kulinski has said, then he gets in and he's, through the MMA guy, he's then tied in with these billionaires, and then he gets tied in with Donald Trump and Donald Trump's people. And it's just human nature that if you are around people, unless they treat you horribly, if they're nice to you, you're going to be like, hey, Donald Trump's a good guy. JD Vance is a good guy. Whatever. Elon Musk is a good guy. Even if they are horrible people, if they're nice to you personally, you might be like, I don't see what the problem is. And then they're your friends, and then you have them on your show. That seems to be what's happening with Joe Rogan.
I have to say, the one thing I just don't understand about the Rogan support, again, is independent of like the work he does with UFC, is simply that like people say, oh, the left pushed him in this direction, like he doesn't have his own agency. First of all, that I just really object to. But more to the point, like I was actually going back and looking at this. He had absolute cretins like Stefan Molyneux. I think I'm pronouncing his last name right.
Yeah. Several
times on during the Obama years. This seems to me something he was like very curious about this long before. I think I saw that 2011, 2012. That was like the second time the guy was on. To me, it seems like there's been an inherent drift, an inherent political leaning or persuasion or pull that has taken him in, I guess, incrementally. But I really object to the idea that like the left gave him. I understand that when he supported Bernie and Bernie got burned for it, that did create some problems, and that could also maybe have played some role. But I guess I come back to the idea that like internally he moved because he wanted to move. What do you make of that thesis?
I think you're largely correct, but I also think that when the people that you cite, like Stefan Molyneux and others, he had Candace Owens on and Dave Rubin on and all those people. And I never had a problem with that at the time, because in those podcasts, there would always be at least one instance, usually even more than one, where he would actually like disagree with them and fight them on something and like stand his ground. And so it felt like this is an honest actor who's like, yeah, he has the person on. Maybe he finds them interesting. It doesn't necessarily mean he agrees with them on all these different things. And there were, he fought with Milo Yiannopoulos. He fought with Candace Owens. He argued with Stefan Molyneux. He argued with a lot of these people, argued with Ben Shapiro. And so it felt like he's an honest actor trying to like navigate his way through. And then eventually, to your point, however he got to the place, he ended up in a very, very bad place. And I think part of his radicalization involved COVID. I think that when COVID hit, he kind of went full COVID libertarian and COVID conspiracy theory type.
But that's also bullshit, because if there is one thing that used to define his politics before all of that, is he had a pretty healthy skepticism of power.
But he wasn't anti-vaccine. He became anti-vaccine during COVID.
This is what I mean. Like there seems to be like a fundamental transformation about core principles that somehow got transformed, or changed anyway, along the way. I understand that COVID had a lot of effects on a lot of different people in a lot of different ways, and I can respect that. But I don't know, man.
I also think it's about owning the libs too. Like when you're surrounded in that environment where everybody around you is very pro-Trump and very right-wing, and your media diet becomes fully right-wing, and all the comedians are right-wing, and all the MMA fighters are right-wing, at some point it's like, if you're in that environment all the time, you start thinking, well, that makes sense. And you start talking more about Hunter Biden and Nancy Pelosi than you ever will about Trump. Trump can set up a scam meme coin and rip off his own supporters. Trump can do a deal with Saudi Arabia and make money from them. And he can, whatever, build a thing in Qatar and build a thing in Oman. And all of a sudden, like, you don't look at that. You don't analyze that. It's all about Hunter Biden and Nancy Pelosi, and he can't break free. I think it has a lot to do with, yes, internal changes, but also friend group type stuff. Also, I think the right is much better at creating narratives and hammering away on them. And I think he got sucked into that. But it became really like just pathetic when he sat across from Trump and let Trump just brazenly lie to his face so many times. I mean, Trump said to him to his face, he said, "I never said lock her up about Hillary. I never said lock her up about Hillary." Cut to, the 17 instances back to back of him saying it, and saying it literally at rallies and using it as like a campaign slogan. And it's like, really, man, you're better than that, Joe. You are genuinely better than that. Like, you could have pushed back. I understand he's a powerful guy. I understand it's intimidating, but like, it was humiliating. He really gave him a hot stone massage. And, in a moment like that, you got to think about it from my perspective too, is like, when I look at that, what am I thinking in my mind? The further right he goes, I'm thinking like, holy shit, did I fail? Right? Because yes, I was friends with him and he's a really nice guy, but also, yes, I have a political project also. And I wanted to make sure that if he was getting pulled this direction, I'm going to make sure to try to pull you back this direction, because those guys are wrong and they're factually incorrect about a lot of shit. And I want to be the guy to lay some shit out for you where you could see my perspective. And at the time, it sounded like he would do it. But then, 2 weeks later, he has on some right-wing figure and nods along with everything they're saying. So very wishy-washy in that respect. So I don't know. It became untenable after a while.
I don't really think that Kyle Kulinski should feel like he had any responsibility to try to pull Joe Rogan from the right, or from the right over to the left. I mean, the guy's an adult, and presumably Kyle Kulinski hasn't been in Joe Rogan's ear, even though he was friendly with the guy, like all of these MMA types and billionaires and all these Trump people that he's been hanging out with. I really think ultimately it probably comes down to what Kyle Kulinski said. COVID just broke so many people's brains. And when you're somebody who's already prone to conspiracy theories, and then it's like, for a lot of people, that was the ultimate conspiracy theory. I mean, I'm sure you have people in your life who COVID just took them over the edge. I know people that, were right wing, but kind of normal people that just went completely, believing that vaccines make you magnetic and, all kinds of insane things. And I think when somebody buys into that kind of conspiracy and insanity, and then they're just questioning everything, I think it just broke a lot of people's minds. And it seems like that's what happened to Joe Rogan, in addition to being just surrounded by all of these right-wing troll voices all the time. I mean, Joe Rogan has never really seemed like a troll to me. Maybe people in some of the communities that he attacks a lot, like transgender people, feel like he's a troll, but he never really seemed like a troll like JD Vance and Elon Musk and these others. But if you're talking to those people all the time, what is it that they say, that you're the sum of the 5 or 6 people that you spend the most time with? And look at the people that it appears that Joe Rogan is spending time with. But let me know what you think about what Kyle Kulinski had to say here. Do you agree with his assessment of this? I will put a link to the Luke Thomas Gets Political channel in the description for this video. Like I said, I'd never heard of him before or his channel, but it seems like he's growing pretty quickly, so check him out. I'm Chris on Culture, and I will see you in the next video.